"This seat isn't for you. Get to the back of the plane." 5 words that changed everything. The sound of a ticket being ripped in half echoed through the first-class cabin like a gunshot. And then, 30 minutes later, the entire flight crew's careers got shredded just like that boarding pass. What's up, Black Stories Box family? I'm Marcus, your storyteller for today's incredible tale of justice served at 30000 feet. Before we dive into this story that'll make your jaw drop and your heart race with satisfaction, drop your city name in the comments below and smash that subscribe button for Black Stories Box. Trust me, what happens at minute 16 is going to make that VIP seat brighter than the overhead reading light, and you definitely don't want to miss the power move that had a whole cabin of 200 passengers giving a standing ovation by the end. This isn't just another discrimination story. This is a masterclass in how to turn prejudice into progress, humiliation into transformation, and injustice into lasting change. Dr. Amelia Washington sat quietly in seat 2 Ampere, her weathered leather briefcase positioned beside her with the precision of someone who understood that details mattered. Her laptop screen glowed with merger analysis spreadsheets that would make Wall Street executives break into nervous sweats. Numbers, representing billions in corporate valuations, acquisition strategies, and financial restructuring that could reshape entire industries. She wasn't flashy in the way that new money often demanded attention: simple charcoal blazer, minimal but elegant jewelry, the kind of understated sophistication that speaks louder than any designer label ever could. But those complex financial models dancing across her screen, they represented the kind of economic power that could move mountains, and as it would soon become crystal clear, completely restructure airline companies from the ground up. Flight attendant supervisor Bethany Crawford had been circling Amelia like a shark since boarding began. Something predatory in the way Bethany's eyes swept from Amelia's natural hair to her modest outfit, then to the expensive laptop, as if trying to solve an equation that didn't compute in her narrow worldview. "Excuse me, miss." Bethany's voice cut through the cabin's quiet bustle. "I need to see your boarding pass again." Amelia looked up, dark eyes calm but alert. She'd been through this dance before. The questioning looks extra scrutiny, subtle implications that she didn't belong in spaces where her success had earned her a place. "Of course," she replied smoothly, reaching for the document that would soon become evidence. Bethany examined the boarding pass with forensic intensity, turning it over multiple times as if searching for hidden watermarks. "This doesn't look right," she announced loud enough for surrounding passengers to hear. "Fake ticket, probably a counterfeit upgrade. These seat scammers are getting sophisticated." The words hung in the air like toxic fumes. Other first-class passengers turned in their seats, some with curiosity, others with the kind of judgment that privilege teaches people to wear like armor. Amelia felt that familiar knot forming, the same sensation she'd experienced as a little girl when teachers questioned whether she'd really done her own homework. "Ma'am, I purchased this seat legally through the airline's website," Amelia said, voice steady, despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "My confirmation number is right there, along with my name and frequent flyer information." But Bethany wasn't listening. In a move that would later be described by witnesses as theatrical and deliberately humiliating, she grasped the boarding pass with both hands and tore it cleanly in half. The ripping sound echoed through the cabin like a slap. Some people muttered Harrison Pierce from across the aisle, voice dripping with entitlement, need to learn how to sit in their proper place. That's when something shifted in Amelia's demeanor. Not anger, she was too smart for that. Not fear, she'd overcome too much to be intimidated. It was something more dangerous: calculation. She calmly opened her phone, switched it to silent, and activated the camera. No arguments, no raised voices, just documentation. She transformed from victim to investigator, gathering evidence for a case that hadn't even begun. 24-year-old passenger Madison Torres, sitting in 4C, watched with growing outrage. As a social media manager for a civil rights organization, she recognized injustice. She opened Instagram at Justice in Motion and started live streaming. "Y'all, you are not going to believe what I'm witnessing right now." Within minutes, her viewer count jumped from 300 followers to over 2,000 active watchers. Comments flooded in: "This is disgusting. Record everything. Get their names." The court of public opinion was in session. Meanwhile, trainee flight attendant Jasmine Kumar watched from the galley stomach, churning with professional obligation and moral outrage. 6 months in training dreaming of an aviation career, but nothing had prepared her for witnessing blatant discrimination at 3,000,000 feet. When Amelia quietly suggested checking gate scan logs, Jasmine noticed something crucial. She'd seen that same boarding pass scan green at the gate 20 minutes earlier. But here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn. Sitting in seat 3B, silver-haired Dorothy Fleming had been observing with sharp eyes of someone who'd seen too much in 75 years to be shocked by human cruelty, but still retained enough faith in justice to be outraged. Young Lady Dorothy said, voice carrying authority of someone accustomed to being heard. I think you should know that I spent 37 years as a federal aviation inspector. I literally wrote the training manual for handling boarding disputes back in 1987. The cabin suddenly felt smaller. Bethany's confident demeanor flickered, the first crack in what would soon become complete collapse of her authority. Dorothy wasn't just a witness. She was an expert witness, someone whose testimony could carry the weight of federal regulation and 3 decades of aviation experience. Captain William Rodriguez emerged from the cockpit like a storm front. 23 years of flying commercial aircraft had taught him that passenger disputes were usually resolved with firm authority and clear communication. He'd handled drunk passengers, unruly celebrities, and nervous flyers, but nothing had prepared him for what was waiting in first class. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, voice carrying the weight of command that comes from having responsibility for 200 lives at cruising altitude. We have a security situation that requires immediate resolution. Ma'am, he directed his attention to Amelia for the safety and security of all passengers. I need you to gather your belongings and move to an available seat in coach. Security Officer Carmen Vasquez approached cautiously, hand instinctively near her radio. She'd been called to handle what Bethany described as an aggressive passenger with fraudulent documentation, but what she found was a woman sitting calmly, laptop still open, showing no signs of agitation despite being publicly humiliated. May I see your identification and boarding pass, please? Officer Vasquez requested, tone professional but not unkind. Amelia handed over her driver's license and phone, which displayed her digital boarding pass in pristine condition. Everything was legitimate. Her name, seat assignment, frequent flyer status, even TSA pre-check confirmation. Officer Vasquez found herself in the uncomfortable position of knowing that protocol demanded she support the flight crew, while evidence suggested they were completely wrong. Ground Supervisor David Chang pushed his way into the crowded first-class section, clipboard and radio, marking him as someone accustomed to solving problems quickly. The crew has discretionary authority in situations like this, he announced, without assessing the actual situation. We're well within our rights to relocate passengers who don't belong in premium seating. That's when Jasmine Kumar made a decision that would define not just her career but her character. She approached Amelia discreetly and whispered, I recorded something you need to hear. The audio clip was damning, Bethany's voice clear as crystal. She doesn't fit the first-class demographic. Look at her. Does she really seem like someone who can afford to be here? We need to maintain certain standards for our premium passengers. The words were followed by another crew member asking about documentation, and Bethany responding, documentation can be faked. Trust me, I know the type. Amelia listened with the same calm expression she'd maintained throughout the ordeal, but inside something was crystallizing. This wasn't just ignorance or implicit bias. This was deliberate, calculated discrimination based on assumptions about her race, appearance, and worthiness to occupy a space she'd legally purchased. Thank you, she said quietly to Jasmine, then turned back to her laptop. Her fingers moved with purpose, composing an email with a subject line that would soon send shockwaves through the airline's corporate headquarters. Urgent material risk assessment required. Board-level discrimination incident. Flight SR 447. The email was addressed to Sophia Chen, Regional Operations Director for Sky Republic Airlines, with copies to corporate, legal, and most significantly the CEO's office. As she typed, Madison's live stream continued gaining traction, viewer count approaching 8,000 with local news stations picking up the feed. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Amelia reached into her briefcase and withdrew a leather portfolio. From it, she extracted several documents, board meeting minutes from Sky Republic Airlines, dated 2 weeks prior, shareholder correspondence, bearing her name, and most significantly stock certificates, showing her ownership of 24.7% of Sky Republic Airlines' outstanding shares. She stood slowly, movements deliberate and graceful, and spoke just loud enough for surrounding passengers to hear. "Captain Rodriguez, I appreciate your concern for passenger safety. However, I should probably mention that this is actually a surprise operational audit previously authorized by the Board of Directors and logged with the Federal Aviation Administration under Inspection Code SR2024891. I'm Dr. Amelia Washington and I own nearly a quarter of this airline." The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the aircraft's ventilation system humming. Bethany's face went from flushed with authority to pale with terror in 3 seconds. Captain Rodriguez looked like someone had just told him his flight plan was leading directly into a hurricane. David Chang's clipboard suddenly seemed very small and inadequate. Madison's livestream exploded. Comments poured in faster than she could read them. Plot twist: she owns the airline. This is better than any movie. The viewer count hit 15,000 and continued climbing as people shared the stream across every social media platform. Madison's live stream had become the center of a digital storm. Number "Seat While Black" began trending nationally, joined by number "Learn Your Place" and number "Sky Republic Shame." Major news outlets started reaching out directly through the chat function, offering interviews and requesting permission to use her footage. The story was no longer contained within the aircraft. It had become a national conversation about race privilege and corporate accountability. But Bethany and Harrison Pierce weren't ready to surrender without a fight. "Those documents could be fake," Bethany declared, voice rising with desperation. "Anyone can print official-looking papers these days. She's probably some kind of professional scammer who targets airlines." Harrison nodded enthusiastically from his seat. "Exactly, I've heard about these people who use sophisticated forgeries to upgrade themselves illegally. This is probably an organized fraud operation." That's when Dorothy Fleming decided she'd heard enough. She reached into her purse and withdrew a leather wallet from which she extracted a retired Federal Aviation Administration inspector's badge, complete with her photo and federal credentials. 47 years in aviation, she announced, voice carrying the authority of someone who'd investigated real fraud and knew the difference between legitimate documentation and criminal activity. "I've seen actual document forgery, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that no one is authorized to destroy a valid boarding pass. What I witnessed here constitutes evidence tampering, and I'm prepared to testify to that fact under oath." The legal implications hit the crew like turbulence. Evidence tampering was a federal offense, potentially carrying criminal charges beyond just employment consequences. Bethany's face went from pale to gray as she realized she might have just committed a felony in front of 200 witnesses and a live internet audience. Amelia seized the moment to propose what she called evidence preservation protocols. She requested that all crew, iPads, and computer systems be sealed pending investigation, that the passenger manifest be photographed before any alterations could be made, and that multiple witnesses sign sworn statements about what they'd observed. Dorothy immediately volunteered as a witness, followed by Madison, who was still live streaming. Even passengers who hadn't spoken up before began raising their hands, offering to provide statements about what they'd seen and heard. Officer Vasquez found herself at the center of an impossible situation. Her radio was crackling with instructions from ground control to support the flight crew's decisions, but her eyes and ears were telling her that a massive injustice was unfolding. The evidence was overwhelming: legitimate documentation, expert witness testimony, recorded audio of discriminatory statements, and now video evidence being broadcast to thousands of viewers in real time. "Ma'am," she said carefully to Amelia, "I can confirm that your documentation appears to be completely legitimate. However, crew discretion policies allow policies exist to protect passengers who are right." Amelia interrupted gently, not to shield employees who are wrong. "The question isn't whether your crew has discretionary authority, it's whether that authority was exercised lawfully and without discriminatory intent." The weight of that statement settled over the cabin like a blanket. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something much larger than a seating dispute. This was about dignity, respect, and the abuse of authority disguised as corporate policy. Jasmine Kumar stepped forward again, this time with another revelation that would prove devastating for Bethany's defense. "I have another recording," she announced, voice shaking slightly with nervousness but strong with conviction. "From last month, when Miss Crawford moved a Latino family from first class to coach despite their valid tickets. She said they didn't look like first-class passengers and that we needed to maintain the cabin's aesthetic standards." The pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't an isolated incident of poor judgment. It was evidence of systematic discrimination that had been happening for months, possibly years, under the guise of customer service and cabin management. Dorothy Fleming made one more crucial intervention. She pulled out her cell phone and placed a call to someone she identified as my former colleague at the FAA Enforcement Division. After a brief conversation, she announced, "I've just spoken with Federal Inspector Martinez, who will be meeting this aircraft upon landing to conduct an immediate investigation into potential civil rights violations and evidence tampering." Amelia opened her laptop and began displaying something that made every airline employee in the cabin break into visible perspiration: a real-time financial dashboard showing Sky Republic's stock price, social media sentiment, analysis, and customer satisfaction metrics, all updating live as Madison's stream continued to gain viewers. "Let me explain something about modern corporate liability," Amelia said, voice taking on the tone of someone accustomed to addressing boardrooms full of executives. In today's connected world, discrimination incidents don't just result in lawsuits, they create immediate, measurable financial damage. She turned her screen toward the gathering crowd, displaying graphs that showed Sky Republic's stock price dropping in real time as news of the incident spread across social media. ESG scores, environmental, social, and governance ratings, matter enormously to institutional investors. Pension funds, retirement accounts, university endowments, they're all watching incidents like this and making investment decisions based on how companies handle discrimination. Captain Rodriguez looked like someone had just informed him that he was flying through a financial hurricane. The company's market capitalization was dropping by millions of dollars while they stood there arguing about a seat assignment. Sophia Chen's phone rang, and Amelia answered it on speaker for everyone to hear. "Doctor, Washington, we've received your risk assessment alert. I'm ordering immediate evidence preservation and dispatching our crisis management team to meet the aircraft." Sophia's voice carried the tension of someone whose weekend had just been ruined by a corporate disaster. "We've also received 17 media inquiries in the past 20 minutes, including requests from CNN, MSNBC, and The Washington Post." The conversation continued with Sophia, revealing what everyone had suspected but no one had been willing to say. There had been multiple previous complaints about Bethany's behavior, all of which had been quietly filed away in human resources folders without any meaningful investigation or corrective action. "How many complaints?" Amelia asked, voice sharp with executive authority. 14 formal complaints in the past 18 months, Sophia admitted, all involving passengers of color being questioned about their ticket legitimacy or being moved from premium seating. The number hit the cabin like a physical blow. This wasn't a pattern, it was a systematic practice that had been allowed to continue because previous victims hadn't had the resources or platform to fight back effectively. Amelia's next move demonstrated why she'd been successful enough to acquire nearly a quarter of an airline company. She gave Captain Rodriguez an ultimatum that was both reasonable and devastating. "Captain, you have a choice. Either you replace your cabin crew immediately to ensure evidence integrity, or I document your refusal to maintain an uncontaminated investigation scene. Either decision will be included in my report to federal investigators." The psychology of the situation was brutal for the crew. They'd gone from feeling powerful and in control to realizing they might have just destroyed their careers by targeting someone who wasn't just a passenger but effectively their boss. Bethany's confident demeanor had completely crumbled, replaced by the expression of someone watching their entire professional life disappear in real time. Here's what really gets me about corporate discrimination. The most expensive part of any business operation isn't equipment or facilities. It's the legal, liability, and reputational damage that comes from employees who think their prejudices are more important than company policy and federal law. The next phase of Amelia's response demonstrated why she'd been successful enough to acquire major stakes in multiple companies. She presented what she called a comprehensive accountability protocol. 5 specific changes that Sky Republic would implement within 48 hours or face public documentation of their refusal to address systematic discrimination. First, she announced reading from notes she'd been preparing throughout the incident. Mandatory 40-hour annual bias training for all customer-facing employees with testing and certification requirements. Failure to maintain certification results in immediate employment termination. Second, implementation of AI-powered monitoring systems that flag potentially discriminatory interactions for immediate supervisory review. Every passenger complaint triggers an automatic investigation with external oversight. Third, establishment of an independent ombudsman position with direct authority to discipline employees and modify company policies. This position reports to the board of directors, not to operational management. Fourth, quarterly audits conducted by recognized civil rights organizations with results published publicly and tied to executive compensation metrics. Fifth, creation of a $10 million scholarship fund for underrepresented minorities pursuing careers in aviation, administered by external organizations to ensure independence from company influence. The proposals weren't punitive, they were transformative. Amelia wasn't just seeking revenge for her own humiliation. She was creating a framework that would prevent future incidents and provide opportunities for people who looked like her to succeed in an industry where they'd historically been excluded. Jasmine Kumar stepped forward again, this time with evidence that would seal Bethany's fate permanently. "I have recordings from 3 other incidents this month," she announced, voice stronger now, with the support of passengers and the knowledge that she was doing the right thing. Miss Crawford moving passengers based on what she called visual aesthetics, questioning black passengers about their ability to pay for premium seats, and instructing other crew members to apply enhanced scrutiny to certain types of passengers. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. This wasn't poor judgment or unconscious bias. It was deliberate, systematic discrimination that had been practiced openly and documented extensively. But Dorothy Fleming made the move that transformed the situation from a corporate crisis into a federal case. She placed another call, this time to someone she identified as the current deputy director of the FAA's Civil Rights Division. "Hello, Janet, it's Dorothy Fleming. Yes, I'm calling from an aircraft where I'm witnessing what appears to be a textbook case of airline discrimination with evidence tampering. Yes, I'm willing to serve as an expert witness. Thank you. I'll expect your investigators upon landing." Madison's live stream had become a cultural phenomenon. Number Sky Republic Shame was trending nationally, joined by number Justice at Altitude and number Dr. Washington. News outlets were preparing breaking news segments, and civil rights organizations were issuing statements of support. Sophia Chen boarded the aircraft personally, accompanied by 2 other executives and the airline's head of legal affairs. The sight of senior management conducting an emergency intervention in front of 200 passengers and a live internet audience was unprecedented in commercial aviation history. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sophia announced to the cabin, "Sky Republic Airlines sincerely apologizes for the disruption to your travel experience. We are addressing this situation with the seriousness it deserves." She then turned to address the crew members who had created the crisis. Reading from formal documentation, her voice carried the weight of corporate authority and legal necessity. "Bethany Crawford, your employment with Sky Republic Airlines is terminated immediately for violation of passenger rights evidence, tampering, discriminatory conduct, and failure to follow established customer service protocols." The words seemed to echo through the cabin despite being spoken in a normal tone. Passengers who had been following the drama leaned forward to hear every detail of the formal disciplinary action. "David Chang, you are suspended without pay, pending completion of retraining programs and a formal investigation into your handling of this incident. Captain Rodriguez, your flight schedule is revoked, pending a comprehensive review of your command decisions and adherence to company anti-discrimination policies." But the most satisfying moment came when Sophia addressed Harrison Pierce directly. "Sir, your behavior during this incident has been documented and will be shared with the International Air Transport Association's passenger behavior database. You will find future air travel significantly more complicated as a result of your conduct today." The database entry meant that Harrison's name would be flagged across all major airlines, marking him as a problematic passenger whose behavior had contributed to a federal discrimination incident. His casual racism had just earned him a permanent record that would follow him every time he tried to book a flight. However, Amelia's finest moment came in her response to the disciplinary actions. Rather than simply accepting the punishment of those who had wronged her, she used the opportunity to demonstrate leadership and character. Officer Vasquez Amelia announced, will be receiving a commendation for her professional handling of a difficult situation and her commitment to following proper procedures despite pressure to do otherwise. Jasmine Kumar will be immediately promoted to lead flight attendant and offered a position developing our new anti-discrimination training program with a salary increase and full tuition support for completing her aviation management degree. The gesture was transformative. Amelia hadn't just demanded accountability from those who had acted wrongly, she was rewarding those who had acted correctly, even when it was difficult or professionally risky. As Bethany gathered her belongings under security escort, the irony wasn't lost on anyone present. Her career had ended with the same sound that started the entire incident, the tearing of important documents, except this time it was her employment contract being destroyed rather than someone else's boarding pass. The cabin erupted in spontaneous applause as the new crew boarded and prepared to complete the flight. Passengers were witnessing something they'd never seen before. Immediate, decisive action against discrimination with consequences that were both meaningful and permanent. 6 months after Flight 447, the impact of what became known as the Washington incident had fundamentally transformed not just Sky Republic Airlines, but the entire commercial aviation industry. The story had become a case study taught in business schools, law schools, and civil rights programs across the country. An unprecedented coalition of institutional investors led by major pension funds and university endowments had pressured 7 major airlines to adopt Amelia's comprehensive accountability protocol. The financial pressure was irresistible. Discrimination had become a quantifiable business risk that affected everything from stock prices to federal contracting eligibility. The Department of Transportation had issued new federal guidelines requiring airlines to report bias incidents within 24 hours and establish independent oversight mechanisms for discrimination complaints. The regulations were formally known as the Washington Standards, named after the woman whose courage had exposed systematic problems throughout the industry. Amelia sat in her corner office overlooking downtown Chicago video, calling her 12-year-old daughter Sophia, who was completing a school project about civil rights heroes. Mom Sophia asked, "How did you know what to do when those people were being mean to you?" "Well, sweetheart," Amelia replied, choosing her words carefully, "I learned a long time ago that the best way to fight unfairness isn't with anger or violence, it's with preparation, evidence, and determination. When someone tells you that you don't belong somewhere, you have 2 choices. You can believe them or you can prove them wrong." Dorothy Fleming had become a consultant, specializing in helping companies implement bias-free customer service policies. Her expertise as a former federal inspector, combined with her witness testimony in the Washington case, had made her one of the most sought-after voices in corporate discrimination prevention. Jasmine Kumar had completed her aviation management degree with honors and was now directing Sky Republic's industry-leading anti-discrimination training program. Her story of courage and speaking truth to power had inspired hundreds of other employees across the industry to report previously hidden incidents of bias and discrimination. Even Madison Torres had transformed her viral livestream into a career opportunity, launching a nonprofit organization that documented discrimination incidents and provided legal resources to victims who lacked the financial means to fight back on their own. The financial impact had been substantial and lasting. Sky Republic's stock price had actually increased following the incident, as investors recognized that strong anti-discrimination policies reduced legal liability and attracted better employees and customers. The $10 million scholarship fund had already provided educational opportunities to over 200 students pursuing aviation careers. Harrison Pierce had learned that some lessons come with permanent consequences. His database entry meant that every flight was a reminder of the day he told someone to learn their place and discovered his own. The most powerful legacy of the incident was cultural rather than legal. Videos of Amelia's calm, professional response to discrimination had been viewed millions of times and had inspired countless people facing their own battles against prejudice and inequality. She had demonstrated that dignity and intelligence were more powerful weapons than anger or violence. Looking back, what strikes me most about Amelia's response was its sophistication and restraint. She never sought revenge or personal destruction of those who had wronged her. Instead, she sought systematic change that would prevent future victims from experiencing what she had endured. She transformed personal pain into institutional progress. 3 years later, Sky Republic Airlines had become the most diverse major airline in the country, with industry-leading customer satisfaction scores and the lowest discrimination complaint rate in commercial aviation. The company that had once enabled systematic bias had transformed into a model of inclusive excellence. So here's my question for you, Black Stories Box family. Do you think Amelia went too far in her response, or should she have acted even more decisively when she first felt that familiar sting of discrimination? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you've ever witnessed or experienced something similar, share your story. Sometimes the best way to prevent these situations is to talk about them openly and honestly. Don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Box for more stories about people who refused to accept injustice and did something meaningful about it. Because unfairness doesn't disappear on its own, it needs documentation, witnesses, and people brave enough to demand better. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. The next story might be about someone you know, or it might even be about you. Justice doesn't happen by accident. It happens when people decide that enough is enough and take action to create the change they want to see in the world.